I read a quote this week that's like been stuck in my head because I'm like, man, I have learned this lesson the hard way a few times. The quote was, the long way is the fastest way. And I'm like, I just feel that because I think that there is this like desire to want to go fast when you're a high achiever and you feel like you're capable of it and you're watching other people do it and you don't get to see behind the scenes and all the chaos and all the sleepless nights and all the, stress that they're going through to make this happen. You just see the way that they present it online and that you're totally capable of it and, that you should go for it. And then we get overwhelmed and we take on too much and we're doing a bunch of half-assed things and nothing is coming to fruition the way that it, you envision it at the beginning. That quote has been replaying in my head all week because I'm just like, man, you're right. There needs to be more people who are vocalizing, just slow down. Time is on your side. You're only racing yourself. You do not have to have, like I was on a call today on an RV park call for Heather Blankenship's mastermind. And one person in there was like, I'm going to open up 4 campgrounds this year, 1 a quarter. And Heather was like, no, you're not.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Welcome back to the Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Oh my God, we're so awkward. I love it.
Yes.
We have our first guest on the podcast, Carrie from Roost North Rentals. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I was just telling you guys that you were my very first podcast that I ever did.
Yeah.
I think it was October of 2023, so like 15 months ago.
Whoa.
And now I'm your first guest on your refresh. So.
Oh my God. Just thinking about what's happened in the 15 months. I'm like, we could record 3 hours of
seriously
drama.
I guess, yeah. It was like right after LA.
Yeah. Because LA was in September and then we came back. I think we recorded it really early on in October.
Wow.
So,
well, welcome back.
Thanks. I know. I was kind of like, I listened back a little bit, like, where was I? Like, where was Carrie?
Yeah.
And I think I was like almost a year into building our hospitality company piece of it and having employees and kind of going down that route. And now I'm like, shed so much stuff. Yes. I was listening to your episode about like subtraction. And I just got to a point where I'm like, what am I doing? Like I was working way more than I've ever worked. I was more stressed. And I just had to really evaluate what I was doing, which is really hard when you're in it. Like you've spent so much money and to be able to be like, wait a minute, what do I want? And when we were in this business, it's really hard to take that breath because everything's moving. Like you have guests or, we had a cleaning company. So we couldn't just really stop and be like, what do I want? So, and we had employees where we're paying them. And, but I just got to this point where I was like, no.
Yeah.
Like I am spending out way too much money. I'm not doing the things that I love. I'm overworked. This isn't the life that I want moving forward. We're going to be 10 years into our investing
chaos
business, whatever you call it. And just really wanting, and also I turned 40. So I'm like, okay, my health is still not good. Like I'm putting all these other things first. So yeah, kind of took some time to like unravel that. Really got down to just Jess, who was my very first employee.
Whoa, so you let everybody go except for Jess.
Yes.
Whoa, I didn't realize.
Carrie,
I love this.
I shed that much.
I shed
the tea.
A lot, and it was hard because like lots of hard feelings for sure. But yeah, and that was hard to do because I am a people pleaser and I like want to like do what's good for everyone else. And I think that is what was happening. And so realizing like, no, I got to do this. And like, just so now looking back, Nate and I just started to do like some planning for this year. We're really late.
We're still in January, so
I know,
late.
but just like looking at the financials and it's like, wow, I'm going to be able to like significantly pay myself this year. And like, we're going to have money to do a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, I'm just so excited. So it's like kind of this reinvigoration into what I really love to do. And so it's like, I learned the hard way. So I think I had to go down all of those paths and be like, okay, is this what I really want to do? And then finding out that just because I like something or I'm good at something doesn't mean that I have to do it. So
I love that. I was gonna say, like, you've been traveling so much, like, with your family and stuff too, which is so fun to watch.
Which I
and
couldn't
love
do
that.
when I had all these employees. I didn't go to spring break. I didn't, like, my family was doing all these things without me. And I'm like, and if you've known me before I did R&R, I love to travel. Like, that was my thing. Like, that is how I got inspired. And that was just part of it. So I think taking all of those things away really made me be like, wait, I like these things. And even designing and finding places and that stuff, like, I didn't have time or money to do those things. So, yeah, it really helped me be like, okay, these are the things that I really love.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, you've got so much power and momentum behind what you're building that all of a sudden you're creating jobs for other people are excited to be a part of it, and all of a sudden you feel like, okay, now I'm responsible for all of these people. And I'm just like trying to imagine myself in that position and how hard it would be to like reel back and be like, actually, I want to take this back in-house because it's my dream, not our dream. And I don't mean to like I just can't imagine going through that phase. That would just, the people pleaser in me is like, oh, I can't
And there was like a lot of good stuff with it because I do love collaborating with people. I do think it was fun to not just be solo, but I think there's other ways that I can do it. And I think in that time I found community. Like, going to LA was huge for me. Like, I met so many close friends that are doing the same thing that I'm doing, but in different industries. And I didn't have that. Like, most people in Traverse City are like straight investors or real estate agents. Like, they are not doing what we're doing. And so I didn't feel like I had that community and I could collab or even just like run things by people and then them be really excited too.
Yeah.
I think you guys were talking about that in one of your episodes, like not being like a wet blanket. But I feel like that happens a lot where you like get so excited about crazy ideas and most people are like, what are you talking about? So having other people that want to do even crazier things or are making some of those steps to be a reality, I think has really helped be like, okay, I don't have to be so single-minded. I think like even defining success, like I think having an office and having employees and being the boss, like that felt like the path to success. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I'm like, I'm also older and I've been doing this for longer. And so I'm like, I have the things. Like, I have 9 properties that I own myself. Like, I have the lake house. Like, I have some of those things. And like, I want to be able to enjoy them now where it's easy to get caught up in the hustle and want to keep doing more and kind of getting to there. So,
well, one of the questions I had for you, and I feel like it tees up really well for this conversation that we're having, is do you at this point in your career feel like you've made it in like the sense of what, you know, when you first started, what you were envisioning this to turn out to be? Do you feel like you've made it yet, or do you feel like you're still, or do you feel like the bar is just continually moving?
Okay. So that's such a good question because I've spent the last like 6 months being really selfish. Like, Jess is going to have her second baby, which I'm so excited about, but that means she's pretty much leaving. And if she comes back, it's going to be really limited because she's going to have 2 under 1.5. So, so it kind of, I'm just taking all these steps to be the person that I want to be. And I hadn't taken that. So even with having Jess, I never really fully like let go. And I did. And I feel a little bit bad for Jess because she took on a lot of stress. But it allowed me to like realize I was so burnt out more than I even knew. And I don't know, I feel like I'm at the cusp of it. And only because like I feel like I'm at the cusp of like having my life together and having my health together and having like just a really solid marriage and a good relationship with my kid and having like that balance of travel versus work that excites me, having our financial stuff figured out, like having a pathway towards our big project that I still haven't started on. Like all these things were like getting in my way. So I think I'm feeling really good, and hopefully we're not here in a year and I'm like, shit.
None of that went how I thought.
You know, like you just get teed up. Like I feel like I'm getting like teed up to like
crush it.
Yeah, and I think also like I've never had like a huge ego, but I also have kind of put that in check too of like my success. Yeah, like kind of just reframing that a little bit. Like I think it used to be like, yeah, I have to own all these hotels and I have to do all this stuff. But then I realized that comes with so much stress and takes you away from some of those other things. And my kid is going to be 10, and I like feel like I don't have that much time with him where he's like little. Like I just was on the phone with him when I caught you guys before, and he's like, I love you, Mama. I mean, I'm hoping that's always the case, but it's like I just really want to spend.
Yeah.
So if we can go to Santa Fe for 2 weeks and like go rock climbing, which I did.
Did you actually do it?
I did.
Okay.
I've never done it outside, but just like doing more of those stuff, but also my health's in a better position. Like I'm not looking at my phone and so stressed. So I've got to kind of figure out though, after Jess goes, like, how do I continue this if I'm going to take on some more of those responsibilities, and what does that look like? But I do know that I have more resources like VAs or part-time. It doesn't have to be like a full-time person, which I think I thought I had to have because it is such a full-time job, it feels like. So I didn't want to put all that pressure on someone, but I think you could have multiple people helping.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's hard to gauge when you're the person who's running it and obsessed with it like we are, how much extra mental effort you're putting into it that maybe isn't necessary. You know, like I will literally like stare at our Instagram and like review everything. And I'm like, okay, if I outsourced social media, like nobody's going to be doing what I'm doing. I'm just obsessing over it because I care about it so much. So it's like, how many hours would this actually take somebody else versus me?
That is huge. Because I like our VA currently, she at the end of every day, she like breaks down how she spent her time, because our goal is to like figure out when she gets to capacity and we need to like expand her hours or hire somebody else or whatever else. And like things that either used to like stop my day or like really affected me, all of a sudden she can like get them done so much easier. She's not as emotionally invested in it. When she makes a mistake, I'm like, you're totally fine. But if I made a mistake, I'm like, oh my gosh.
I'm the hardest person on myself. I'm trying to get better at it, but even Nate will be like, sometimes he'll just look at me and be like, you're so hard on yourself. Like, watch how you're talking. Which helps when you have a kid to be like, okay, even if I'm trying to encourage them, like they're watching me, so I got to be careful. But no, I agree. And I did, excuse me, I did read Who Not How To.
Yeah.
And I think like that helped. I know Buy Back Your Time, and that was great too, but I feel like this one just felt a little bit more obtainable. Like you could go kind of slow. And really taking that on. So I did that even with like some of my health stuff. Like my nephew is just finishing up culinary school, so I have him come out once a week, and he like preps food for us on Monday.
Saw that on your stories
and so it's like so fun. But I get to hang out with him, and he like cooks fun things, and then I'm prepared. Like when I drove down here, I had food, and not just like eat gas station food.
Although I do love fast food, it doesn't love me. So
just like those things where it's like, okay, being able to, I don't know, give myself permission to be like, okay, I do have some resources where I can direct that towards and like be able to use that. And I do feel like Nate and I have always had a mentality which has worked really well of like, we can do everything, like, and really try to make sure we're like saving money. But at some point it's like, okay, then I'm not going to get where I'm wanting to be. And so I'm just playing with that and dipping my toe in, and it's working well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I know you guys have like been starting to do that, especially with this podcast studio, which totally surprised me.
Yes.
It's very professional in here.
It is. It is.
Who are we? What are we doing here?
It's a long way from me being in one of my rentals and you guys being at home in separate areas.
Bedroom.
Me being on an iPad using a ladder.
I had like the bassinet set up in the background of my bedroom before I had the baby too.
Yeah.
Like it was just not it. But
but still, it's like in launching the podcast in the like most DIY way possible. When we first launched this, it introduced us to so many people that it introduced us to you, you know, it introduced us to so many people along our journey that's helped us out. So start scrappy, but this is way nicer.
Yes. But I think I think people forget, they might see you guys here and be like, that's what I have to do. And if I can't get there, I'm not going to do it. And it's like, no, you have to remember they started.
Go back.
Really bad
and
spot.
so I think it does prevent people. And I think that that's still kind of that concept that happens for me too. It's like, oh, if I can't do it this way, or if I can't do it perfect, or if I don't have the time to commit to it, like it can't happen. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it, and I know we're similar on this, like control factor, like, and then seeing that people can do it better. I don't know if we talked about this last time, but even just giving up pricing, I was like,
Yes.
Nate like took it out of my hand. Like I was clawing
Pried
onto
it out of your
it.
fingers.
How dare you suggest you
I
can
was
do
like,
it better?
only I can do this. Like
Yeah.
I know my market. I've
Yeah.
been doing this for so long, and we've done better on our revenue. And we have more competition. And
Yeah.
like even we did our numbers we had a goal that we set for 2024, and I think we went up like 15 or 20%, which is a lot.
That's a lot.
Especially we didn't do much to our properties, and we have much more competition. So
Yep.
this year I'm like, if I can focus on like doing some more stuff with our properties, like I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And then having more time where I'm not having to like manually go in and change pricing and forgetting about something or
Yes.
feeling like I'm charging too much. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Once you see those, it's very humbling.
So
Yeah.
humbling.
I feel like there's this like overarching theme with a lot of us right now of subtracting things and like pushing them out. And I think it's because we're surrounded with people who are all of the same mindset of doing that, which is like another thing about like the community that you have around you. Cause I feel like me personally, I grew up in such an environment of people being like, no, don't spend your money on that. That's like way too expensive, or don't do that. And then like being around people who are like, no, your time is much better spent over here. Please hire that out, because like your podcast looks like crap. Please start like hiring it out or something like that. And I feel like we need it. And so it's funny that like we're all on the same page right now because we spend so much time with each other, and we're
Yeah.
hearing that like you're doing it and we're doing it and other
Yeah.
people in our community are doing it.
And then seeing the success of what it's given you. So like, I know you were talking about like your time spent finding guests and like coordinating it and editing, like all the things that you were doing, like watching all the podcasts and stuff, all of that space, like seeing you like, and I mean, I'm sure it is, you took a break from the podcast, but it's like you were able to do these other things. And so now you don't have to take a break from it
Yeah.
and still be able to do it. So I think seeing
Yes.
people's success of like, oh, when they gave up that,
Yeah.
what else
Well,
could they accomplish?
And this
Yeah.
specifically doesn't, like, to me, in comparison to what it felt like to record the podcast before versus this, like this, I am excited, energized, stoked to be here because I only have to do the thing in the podcast that lights me up, which is talk to people. But when it comes to like scheduling, uploading, editing, you know, all of that, I'm like, ugh, like, no, I don't want to do that.
And that's what you'd have to do if you didn't pay for someone to do
Yeah.
it, and then it would limit it. But yeah, being able to just show up and
Oh, it's magical. It's magical.
and it keeps you in your like what do they call it? Like the genius
Zone.
zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
And being able to find all of that in one spot, because like I was doing all of that and it just didn't make sense for me. Like I don't have any of those skill sets. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to like find somebody who's going to find guests. We're going to have to find somebody to edit. And then somebody else is going to have to post. We're going to like have to train our VA to do that and write the descriptions. And all of it is in one spot now.
And
it's-
just all that you just said, all of that is brain power.
It's
to
so
do
much.
that.
It's so much.
Yeah.
And then of course, like I have the rest of the back end of Carwell. So I'd be like in the middle of editing and then emails come in and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
let me stop this and like respond to the emails. And I'm like, no, I'm able to like separate and schedule my time so much better from us getting a VA, hiring this out. Like we now are working with somebody else who's like helping us with marketing, and like we have somebody who like sends out our
sales.
emails, and we have somebody who
That's
does our
awesome.
sales and stuff now. And Sarah and I have always been like, we need to do all of it because we like bring in the money to Carwell's and then we have it and then we put the money into our properties. And of course, like we want to continue expanding real estate, but I think the growth of Carwell's is really important to both of us right now too. And so we're
Yeah.
investing a lot more back into Carwell's itself instead of real estate.
Well, and treating that as a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we
Like
didn't know
if
that
you
would
treat
be
it like a
thing.
property, like you gotta like you
Reinvest.
you aren't doing all of the stuff for your property. So it's like you're kind of doing the same thing with your business.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. Okay, I have another question for you. Because you have been such a sounding board for me in the past year and a half, going through partnerships for the first time in properties, and that just being a huge learning curve. And you said something to me a year ago that just like stuck with me because I'm like, God, I feel that, but I've never heard anybody else say it. When you were like, look, I just want to build the things that I want to build, and I don't want to be collaborative on certain things. I just want to like be in my own creative sandbox.
Yeah.
And so I would love for you to talk through why, like how you feel about partnerships in general, and how you go about building your business. Because I know for me, that conversation was just like, Okay. Yes. Like there's other people that see it a similar way. So
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I still feel the same way. I think I want to be able to find this balance where I can still drive that, but then I do have people supporting me, but it's in a lesser capacity, I think. So, and allows me to change directions, because I think that that's what happens when you start building a team and you're training them and they're all expecting to go in one direction. It's really challenging to change that. So we were going down this property management way, which I don't think we've talked about it too much, but I already have built a property management company in the past, and that also went terrible. That was a partnership. And so I was like, okay, I'll do this myself. Like, I know how to do it. I'm good at it. I still have clients that like are begging me to come back. And so we started on this journey, and for some reason, now looking back, I'm like, I know I didn't want to do it. Like, my heart wasn't in it, but we like kept like not getting clients, and I kept like not moving forward with it. But then the whole team wanted it. And so it was just like this frustration piece of it. And so, but I think I didn't have the heart to be like, I don't really want to do this. And I know that you guys want to do this, but I don't want to do this. But they wanted me to sort of like lead the way in that. So yeah, I think I feel the same way. I mean, I have a conversation next week with a new builder for our trunk line project, which I'm really excited about him because the last builder just didn't work out, and I didn't even know he'd be interested. I just started like throwing it out there again, and his name got thrown in the hat, and he's just really great. He's done some really quality projects for some close friends of mine. So like, I don't know, I'm really excited about that, but I still don't have the urge to like
bring on partners in any capacity.
But I am, because he's a builder. Like, I'll do that. But I just don't think I still want to, I don't know. I'm still in that.
Yeah. Because everyone, when they, like, even after we left our retreat or any time that we've had an in-person event or go to a conference, it's like afterward, you'll see people who, myself included, who like becomes kind of close with someone. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, let's do a property together. Or like, let's like launch something together. And everyone that I've ever talked to has always been like, oh my God, yeah, it's going to be so much better if there's more people involved. We can like share the workload, whatever. And you were the first person that I ever talked to that was like, no. And I was like, okay, I'm feeling that now that I'm in these partnerships, but like, tell me more, you know?
I think I do feel like this is something that I think you've learned, and I had to learn, even though I haven't gotten into big partnerships like that, but still just in other things of like, I tend to get really excited about things. And when you're with someone else, you get really excited and you're like, let's do it. But then you might not necessarily know that person. Yeah. And most times you probably have the same skills if you're getting along that well.
Yeah. I was just going to make that comment that like you are looking at a partnership, but it's a very clear line of like where his skill set ends and where yours begins. So there's no overlap whatsoever.
Yeah.
Sarah and I have this conversation all the time. And even my husband would be like, why are you and Sarah not like partnering on properties? And I'm like, we can do the exact same things. And so like Sarah and I look like we have similar design, but like she loves symmetry and I love asymmetry. And so when we were designing together, even back then, she'd be like, well, I want those lamps to be the same. And I'm like, but I don't want them to be the same. And so now it's like...
and one of you has to compromise.
Yeah. And there's like no butting heads when we're like running parallel instead of like trying to blend together.
Yeah.
And that's hard because like, especially if you ever do reach the point where you need capital or you need that other skill set, you have to make sure that they don't overlap yours at all, or there is going to be some butting of heads. Even if there's like, I personally think even if there's clear lines drawn of what your role is, if they have that skill set too, they're going to have opinions on what you're doing, whether that's their job in the partnership or not.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's also this tendency that I have witnessed a lot of just people wanting to go really, really fast. And I think I feel like sometimes I'm from the future and I'm like, even with Fede, I'm like, slow down. You're like, so it's like, I just feel like I've gotten myself, or I've just gone so fast and like it ruined my health. And I just feel like, I don't know. I always say if I'm building something to last, like I don't mind going slow. And so for me, I think it's, now that we're 10 years in and we got a property a year and I own them all, like it feels really good.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I fought that urge. And I'm not saying that those things don't work for other people, but the life I want to live, like, I just don't want to have so much stuff, because then it is much more, like, so much more responsibility, and it takes away from the things that I want to do and from, like, the relationships and, like, the freedom that I want. Like, I want to be able to travel around and have some free space in my brain. And I think that there just is a tendency, and it works out really well for people, but just to, like, go really, really fast. And that's why a lot of times you need money, because you can't afford to do that.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because I feel like in our mentorship, a bunch of people would be like, I want to get 2 or 3 properties a year, like, before they've gotten one. And I love the ambition and I love the goals. But then once you've gone through one and you realize how much work it is to get it set up and then to run the property, they feel like, oh, because they didn't get 2 or 3 a year, they're slowing down. And because Sarah has 5 or whatever else, like, they need to move at that rate. And it's like, 1 a year is great. 1 a year is good growth for, like, the type of life that I want to live, you want to live. And so I think people just don't understand that, like, the people who are moving fast are doing nothing else because it's so much work.
Yeah. And they might not like it.
Yeah.
My friend Lena thought she wanted to get into property management, or, well, own a short-term rental, and now is selling hers because she's like, no, this is not the side hustle that I want or need.
Yeah.
Like, do not message me again. Like, I don't even think she's renting it right now. She's just trying to, like, show it, because she's like, I am done. Like, because someone did the whole, there's bed bugs.
Yep.
And it wasn't true. And she's just like, don't. Like, literally, I think she deactivated her listing, like, that day.
I love how sure she is about her decision.
But it's like, she had a plan where she's like, okay, I'm going to start adding. We're going to look for more. And it's like, I think sometimes you have to, like, sit in it. And again, and I think sometimes people also don't get to that conclusion because they feel embarrassed, or they're like, oh, I'm just going to keep going down this path because I told everyone I was doing it.
Yeah.
And so it is kind of, like, scary to be like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And so I think you have to, like, check your ego to be like, nope, I'm going to tell everyone, like, that's not the path, because they're not the one that's having to live your life.
Carry your mental load. Yeah. I think it takes a whole different kind of confidence to slow down and be like, because especially when I look at you and I'm like, you could have $100 billion in real estate if you wanted to, right? Like, you've got the brain that could do it. You've got the vision that could do it. You know how to create the experience that people will pay for to justify having that many properties. But at the end of the day, it's like, that's not what you want. And so why do people feel an obligation to, build it as big as they possibly can just because they can, And so
I do feel like, it's like that restraint can almost be harder. And I think that's the same thing with, like, not getting distracted, because it is easy to be like, oh, now I'm going to go do this and I'm going to add this, and not just be like, okay, I'm going to keep, like, focusing on here. And honestly, we looked at it, and if I, like, focused a lot of the energy that I was putting in all these spaces into our units, like, that directly comes back to me, because I'm not paying a management fee right now. So if I make another $50,000 on my properties, like, that's coming to me. So it's like, I could be doing that where it's something I love and I know how to do, and it's, like, benefiting my guests, it's, like, benefiting my brand. Or I can, like, but it is easy because, like, it's like, oh, this shiny thing over here.
Shiny red ball syndrome. Who has that?
I feel like she's doing really good, okay?
She's been better.
She's been better.
I'm not building so fast anymore.
She's been going through it. And I think that's the other thing and we've talked about this, like, with all the regulation stuff, and I know you guys did, like, a whole podcast on it. But there was, like, a whole day where one of our highest grossing property, like, I didn't think we were going to get our license renewed. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we've had our license on for a couple of years. It was just, like, a communication issue. But the response back from our zoning manager was, like, nothing we can do. And I just had to go through this whole process and then just at the end of it be like, okay, like, it's out of my control. And then it ended up being an email back being like, oh, yeah, you're right. This was, like, miscommunication.
Can I get one of those emails?
I know. You're like, wait, where's my spam? It's in your spam.
I've just been here the whole time. On the CC. It's coming.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like for me, too, it's like, I don't think people realize, like, we can handle so much stress.
Yeah.
And we are high functioning at it. And so, but I think that still does a lot. Like, you need to take some time off once you get through this. Like, we're going to be on you about it, because even though you can handle it and you can do it, it's like doing something to you. So, like, I feel like that's for me too. It's like, okay, the more you have, they're just going to inevitably come up. And with Michigan, you know, I'm trying to protect myself as much as possible, but that happens. And even that property, we had regulation and they changed it and we didn't get grandfathered in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
It is. We talked about that today on the call that we had with our internal community. I was like, it's the wild, wild west. Like, it is what it is. But now that I'm back shopping for properties for both myself and investors, because I'm like, I can't go through a summer with no property, you know, like I need something up by March at least. And I'm calling all these townships and I'm coming in hot. You know, I'm like, listen, this is what I've gone through. I'm not investing in your area. If there's any chance that this is getting taken down, I'd rather just keep calling and like going elsewhere. And literally I am 100% for probably the 10 townships that I've called and properties that we're interested in. All are like, love it. Come on in. And I'm like, did I just land 3 for 3 in places that are like middle fingers up to short-term rentals? Like, whatever. It's my capacity for stress is getting stretched for some reason in the future that I just don't understand yet.
I know.
I think it's so funny, the regulation stuff that we're all going through. And then Michael Elefante posted a post the other day talking about how Michigan is one of the best Midwest places to be investing right now. And I'm like, wait a second. Not that I don't love Michigan, but like the regulation here is crazy. And he's a very like established investor in his area. So I'm like, you're going to start pushing the Midwest when the regulation's this crazy right now, dude? Like,
well, I think, I mean, I definitely feel like there's that thing with everything where it's like now Traverse City specifically showing up in all these places. So then people are like, oh, I want to invest in there. And it's like, I see that all the time in the Facebook groups. They're like, I want to buy something. And then the realtors will chime in and be like, where?
Oh, yeah. They think like, Traverse City's off the beaten path. They're like, oh, never heard of it.
Yeah. It's like, where are you going to find one that that still has a license left or that you can afford to make money on? You were talking about that the other day. It's like, no one's going to buy $1 million lake house and then make money off it on Airbnb. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Those are the people that are buying those are people from California that think that's still cheap or like from other spots. Like there is a cap on it. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see. Because even the crazy building stuff, like our building codes are pretty crazy, at least like kind of up where we are. I'm sure there's still pockets of it, but like you can't go build in a cave here. Like no one's letting you do that.
Yeah, it's funny. My representative that I talked to the day that we were in Lansing, and then even my township, like when I'm talking to them about regulation, all of them are like, we're not turning Alpena into a Traverse City. Like that is their
North Star.
They're like, we are not turning it into Traverse City. And I'm like, first of all, I feel like there's like a good balance between you want the tourism that Traverse City has, but you're not looking for the traffic that comes with or whatever else. Yeah. And so I'm like, there has to be a balance between those things because Traverse City makes a lot of money, like from tourism.
And they have good restaurants.
And there's like great.
But we still struggle up there with like we've been told that the short-term rentals are bringing all the tourists up there. I'm like, we're just a response to that. So there's a lot of
hotels that are on that one strip on Grand Traverse Bay.
Still getting built.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're a strain on the infrastructure. I don't know. That's a whole nother podcast that we can do, but I'll get real fired up.
I will get spicy.
And we've also I feel like we have a really good host community in Michigan, and we've wanted to work with people to say, like, here's other ways that we can find housing. Like, of course, we live in these communities. We love Michigan. We want to have neighbors. Like, we want to have year-round restaurants and all of those things. But it's like, it's easy to say short-term rentals is the problem. Yeah. Because if you try to solve it in any other way, it's so complicated because the government's going to have to put money into a project or give tax breaks because if people are buying land in downtown Traverse City, their highest and best is not like workforce housing. No. It's just not. And there's not many people that have money that can do that out of the kindness of their heart. Like,
right.
It's just not going to happen. Or if it directly benefits their business, but there's really no businesses up there that are that big. Yeah. I mean, some of them are starting to do that. on like a little small scale so that they can keep employees, but we have a lot of like small businesses up there.
Yeah, there's like wealth in Michigan, but not that kind of wealth in Michigan,
Yeah. It's not like Colorado where I feel like they have really 2 solid seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can do that and they build it into it and they kind of did that from the beginning. But we don't really like our winters. This winter is better, but like the last couple winters, we really haven't had a ski season. So our winter's been really rough. So we really only have one peak season.
3 months, 4 months, maybe.
I know. Which can feel appealing to people. But yeah, I do feel like that was my drive down here in the snow. I was listening to your guys' other couple of podcasts this year. But yeah, just interesting to see what will happen in this industry and see if people will get out of it. And I know a lot of people did get in over COVID and just sort of threw something up. And so I don't know. I feel like Nate and my husband we're just kind of like, oh, this will be kind of interesting to sit. Like, we're in a really good position because we bought really well. Like, our places are well designed. We have a brand. And obviously, there's things we can do. And I'm more doing those out of, like, fun, too. Yeah. Like, it's a fun challenge, and I want to refresh them. But just sort of, like, sitting back and being like, what's going to happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And I do think that's what I think some townships are taking that. Like, the competition will sort of, like, weed people out, but then I think there's some that are just afraid and worried, and I do get it. There's some neighborhoods in Traverse City that you could be a full-time person and be surrounded, and I wouldn't want that.
I wouldn't want that either.
So
yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm so curious to see how the regulation will play out in Bitely, because we have had an entire conversation with the zoning guy about how we're not getting a permit. And he knows we're still operating, and there is a fine in place. And we have our neighbor check our mail every single day, and it's been 3 months since they've told us, no, you can't continue operating, and nothing in the mail.
Crickets.
And so I'm like, is this going to be just a known illegal operation that everybody's just turning their head the other way because they don't want, just like...
Well, and that's what I try to tell townships, because we're in multiple. That's like the other kind of downside, and as you are too. Mm-hmm. Are you in the same?
I'm just the one,
is like, don't spend all this time doing regulation if you can execute it, because then what's the point? Then you're just punishing good hosts.
Yeah.
Or getting them out. So people that follow the rules, or like, they're just going to like weed those people out. So like, even just having a place to report, like if someone is having a party or something like that, because we don't want parties at our house, like, so it's like, we want a way to know that so that we can have better guests. But then if you can't execute on your rules, then you're just putting all these other rules in place, like high nightly minimums and all these things to sort of prevent that. But you're just ruining it for the good guests or the good hosts.
The zoning person for my township, I would talk to her at the meeting, and she was like, we have no idea what to do, because she's like, I'm the person who has to enforce whatever we decide. And she's like, I can't take on anything else. And the police force in the area, they're losing people because their funding is going even more down. And so she's like, we can't even have our police force enforce anything if there is parties. And so like, I ran them through like the no one night stays, like we check people's IDs, whatever, when they're booking. And so I ran them through all of that, and they were like, oh my gosh, like we didn't even know that those things could be implemented in how somebody runs their short-term rental. And I was like, well, I'm just going to say I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for everybody in the community. But I was
you
like,
want that because I think it's good. And I think that's why I think we all want some sort of reasonable regulation, because we want to keep that standard high. So we want those things to be the case for everyone. And there's a lot of hosts out there that are not doing that. And then it does make a bad name for us, because we're all lumped into that Airbnb.
Yeah.
Yes.
The people directly across the channel from me, they listed like right before I did. And it's a little bit bigger house. They host 10, we host 8. And my neighbors went to the first meeting that they had on short-term rental regulation, complaining about short-term rentals. And it ended up being my neighbor. And we talked to him later. We were like, dude, like we have conversations all the time. You have my direct phone number. We're in contact constantly. Like if you ever have any issues, you know that you can call. And there's been like little things like lights and stuff that he's complained about. And it turns out the people across the street were throwing parties, were like having guests that were throwing parties, and the police were called multiple times. And so he was like, I wasn't complaining about you, I was complaining about them, but I was like, we're across the channel from each other. So it's like I'm getting lumped in with them.
Yes.
And so when I came to speak, I was like, my neighbor actually is the one who came and spoke last time, and like ran them through that situation. And he was like, no, you guys are great, and they want like their family to rent our house and stuff like that. But you do get lumped in when like bad situations happen, especially if they're right next to each other.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, yeah, have a quiet hour, have those things, and we'll enforce them because we want that. And we want to be good neighbors. I think that is essential. I think neighbors is like the number one
Totally
important.
agree.
Like if you have good neighbors and keep that relationship,
Yeah.
you're good. If you don't, they're going to call the cops on you all the time, as you
All
as
the
you know.
time. They will show up outside of your house. They will take photos.
And then they'll start getting aggressive and like
yes.
being destructive.
They'll find you on
and-
Facebook. They will send you hate mail. It's a whole thing. Yeah, but we're moving forward on a property for an investor right now that is right next to one of our other properties, specifically because
you know,
the
that-
neighbors are like, we love this.
And I think like when we talked about that, like knowing our market, I think this is going to be really helpful, even more so than it's been. Like it will be harder for people that don't know don't really intimately know Michigan to invest, or they will have to go through someone that does because they need to know those things, which is so funny to say. Like, do you know the neighbors?
yeah. Yeah.
When you're trying to buy something,
Do you
like,
understand that the houses are on top of each other on a lake?
yeah,
Like,
other investors would be like, no, I absolutely do not care. I don't want to know about the neighbors. You're like,
When-
you gotta.
Yeah, when we're touring properties, like even this weekend, we spent all Sunday touring properties, and we would drive past specific houses that were like 2 doors or 3 doors down from the house we were looking at. And just looking at the outside of the house, the condition they keep it in, whatever the case may be, Ethan will be like, that'll be the one that's the problem. I'm like, it's so sad that we know at
I know.
this point.
And then you're like, are you prepared to send Bob a Christmas gift every
Yeah.
year
yeah.
and remind him of your number? And it's like the things that I feel like Michigan hosts have to do is a lot more than
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah, because you get one. I mean, even we have 2 mentees who have a property in Traverse City, just outside of Traverse City, that they have the permit for, and they've checked all the regulation, but their deed still says residential only, and they have a neighbor who's like not even close to them, right? Like all of their immediate neighbors, they're very close with. They like go to it's in an HOA. The HOA allows short-term rentals, even though the deed says not, it's not allowed. So they'll go to the HOA events and like mingle with everyone. And they still have one neighbor that's suing them over the deed issue. And the neighbor that's suing them is also doing something that's against the deed. So she's having her neighbor sue them, even though she's behind it, so that she doesn't get like dinged
So
for
messy.
It
Yeah.
really can be. There is so much to be said about like either being at your property for an extended period of time and actually creating those relationships. Like one of our neighbors literally never talks to us. Like they could care less. But the older couple, like because I got pregnant and they saw me be pregnant and now they see Oz, they'll like call and be like, oh my gosh, how's the baby doing? Is he getting so big? And then every time we're there, they want me to bring him out and like show him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you feel like you're
This
like
is,
little
like, part of it,
grandparents for
yeah.
them. And
No, I do that every time on our one property. I always go across to our neighbors and talk to them. And I'm like, hey, we're going to have a dinner party, but I wanted to come say hi. It's going to be me. And he knows like my car. He knows his Jess car. But we like give them little presents and gifts and just make sure we pay our road maintenance fee on time and
all the
all those
things,
things.
you gotta pay attention to. That's so annoying.
yes, it is.
One thing I wanted to ask you about as well. You are diagnosed ADHD, correct?
Not officially, but pretty much.
Because Fede just got diagnosed officially ADHD,
Okay.
and I've never gone in to be
Yeah.
diagnosed either. But I've mentioned it, like just having squirrel brain all the time on a few of our posts on social media, and every time I do, people are like, "How do you build a business with ADHD?" And I'm like, "I don't know, like." Have an Emily, like that's my solution. So I'm curious from your perspective, like in working with other people or trying to manage that, like have you found any ways in growing a business with having ADHD that works for you?
I mean,
or
I
that
think
you-
I also technically, Nate's my Emily, to be honest. So I do feel like he's helped, like, I feel like we're just a really good team. And I do feel, so I guess like when I say, yeah, I'm not like working with other people, but I am working with Nate, and I do think he kind of helps. I always say, like, holds the string to my balloon. So it's like
Such a good definition.
Because I do have, and so I think what's worked really well is if I have these crazy ideas and then I can get like even a little bit of like a nod from him, or I can just kind of tell that I'm like, oh, he doesn't hate this. Like, he won't necessarily be like, I love this, I'm totally on board, but I'm like, okay,
that is literally you.
So I feel like if we both can get on the same page, it almost feels like then it equals us out, and then we can make those smart decisions, because I do feel like, yeah, one, it's really easily to get distracted, and two, like just being a starter. I think that was the other thing of Who Not How that was really validating to me is like when they were interviewing, I listened to the audio, but they were interviewing Dan Sullivan.
Okay, yeah.
And he was like, I'm a starter. I'm not a finisher. I'm not a follow through person. And I was like, more people need to like own that, you know?
Guilty.
Because like, and I think it just gave me permission to be like, oh, it's not a bad thing. Like, again, I'm so hard on myself. It's like, it's not a bad thing that I'm like good at starting things. I think it can be viewed as like, oh, well, she didn't follow through or she didn't do this. It's like, no, I need someone to then take that and then go with it, and then I'm going to go do the other thing. But I do think it's still worth, like, kind of trying to keep yourself somewhat. It's like, even going into this next year, I think I want to, like, be structured enough, but I still, just knowing myself, have to leave a little bit of percentage of, like, who? Can I swear?
Yes.
Who fucking knows what's going to happen? And I can't close that off totally.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
If you were sitting here and be like, you have to write down your 5 things and that's all you can do, I would feel so constricted.
Yeah.
So I want to have goals, but I want to like leave myself open because I do get so inspired. And so I do think just viewing it as a positive, I think helps, but then to be able to be okay with finding those people that can help. So like having someone that can, schedule your things or take your notes or whatever you're not good at.
Yeah.
And then just like being okay with that and like not being so hard on yourself to allow yourself. Like that's what we were talking about even with this podcast space. It's like you just get to show up and be in your genius zone, and you didn't have to do any of the scheduling. You didn't have to do any of those stuff. And then it leaves Emily open to doing all these other creative things, even though you can do it. So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm trying to reframe it because I think for so long it's been viewed as such a negative thing.
Yeah, because I'll beat myself up about it too. But I think now we're getting, especially with Emily when she's now a new mom and more vocal with me about being like, I'm at capacity, then like with me being like super excited about something, like I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to bring back the podcast this year. I miss it so much. It like helped us so much. People love the long form, yada yada. Then when I go think about pursuing that again, I'm like much more conscious of the fact that I know I will not be the person on the back end to do it, even if I'm ambitious about it and I'm like, oh, this will be great and I'm sure I'll get to it. Like I think I've gotten better about calling my own mental lies out that I'll tell myself. Yeah. And then when I go to think about it, I'm like, okay, how do we make this not heavy of a lift for both me and Emily? Because in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll definitely plug in and help Emily. And then I don't plug in and help Emily. And then it just falls on Emily. And then she's like, oh.
And then there's probably resentment, like all this like unnecessary things where you're like, okay.
She's like, no new things. And I'm like, what do you mean? I've got time. And she's like, I don't.
Yeah. And I feel like it's easy to then feel frustrated. Like you're restricting me. And then it's like, okay, no, they're just being able to see it from this like different perspective. And so I do feel like that's helpful to have someone in your life that can do that because and also knowing that I think what I've also learned is like, again, I think for some people it's like, oh my gosh, you keep talking about this resort that you're going to do. And I'm like, eventually we'll do it and it's going to be cool. But it doesn't have to go off your list. Like just because you don't do it right away doesn't mean that you can't do it. And I think there is this almost like competitive race to be like, oh, well, I got to do it first. And it's like, no, I'm going to do it my own way. Who cares if someone else does it? So I don't know. That's like also just like a mental thing that you have to do. It's like, okay, you don't have to rush to do a podcast because if you rush to do it just because you want to be like the first or you want to like, you feel like you're like strike while the iron's hot, like you're not going to show up.
Yeah.
and do it the way that like is unique to you that people are going to want to listen. Like there has to be that other piece of it. So
yeah, I think like from a me perspective, like you said, you have Nate and Sarah has me. Having somebody who's like not afraid to tell you like,
yes,
hey, like
because we are very different. Like I just like I know we're so similar that like it's kind of scary to be like. No, especially not that we're like mean, but it's like we're so committed, like we're so excited, and then to be like
met with any resistance.
We're like, oh, now I just want to do it more.
I love the big idea, but there's this, and this to consider.
Yes.
And like there have been times when I've been like, okay, Sarah, there's like we're starting all these new things, and I don't have the capacity to continue starting, so let's like stabilize these and not get rid of the new things. We're just gonna table them for a minute, and it like. You guys talk about like the not finishing thing being seen as like a downer. You get seen as a downer by like holding those people back, and you have to be like, no, like we can't be good at everything all at once. And so like let's stabilize these things and then move on. And if you don't have a person who's willing to say that kind of stuff, everything becomes chaos. Because I haven't always been okay with that. And I've been like, yep, Sarah, I'll do that. Like let me just add it to my plate. And then finally I'm like, whoa.
And then you get overwhelmed and then you can't be the best person that you are too. So yeah, I do think it just takes, I don't know, just growing through it. And also again, being like open about it. I think we all have had that conversation. Like Patrick and I did a whole podcast on it and just being like, I just want to be more open about it of just like most entrepreneurs, a lot of times that is
we have squiggly brains.
Yes. And and I do think also having a child that has some of those things too, like it helps me look at it differently. And I'm really trying to just refocus and reframe it for him. And so like it helps for me, like just society and school and all of these things are set up or just like a regular job. I think that's why a lot of us are entrepreneurs. It's like a regular job is set up for people with certain brains and our brains think differently. And so, but then to be able to like take all those skills and then if you're able to either, you know, figure out the other things or have someone help you, it's like, okay, you kind of almost have like a little superpower.
Yeah. Yeah, it does feel like a superpower and a curse, you know, and in the same breath, depending on if you have the right people around you or you don't have the right people around you.
And I think there's phases too. I think we all like go through it. And I think when something doesn't happen and then we're like, it's easy to like maybe view that it was all of our negative things. And then when things are going well, it's like, oh, it's because I don't know.
Yeah.
I think just again, the more we all talk about it and the more we're open, I think with everything, even just the struggles with short-term rentals and regulation, I think the more that we can be honest about that to people, like really helps. Because I do feel like sometimes people think it looks glamorous and it's like, I don't want to discourage people from it, but you really have to understand, like.
You have to love it.
Yes.
Like if you don't love it, you're going to be like, you know, anyone who doesn't love it, who's going to start a listing and be like, literally, they threaten bed bugs. Like, girl, that is weekly, you know, and running these B&Bs.
Yeah,
there's always
you're going to
that.
have situations that happen. So yeah, it's like, and I've talked about that too. It's like, what sandwich do you want to eat? I read that in some book, but it's like every industry has those bad things. So it's like telling people what those are and be like, okay, yeah, I can handle that. That's something that I want to take on and get all these other things. Or they're like, I absolutely do not want to do that.
Yeah. I read a quote this week that's like been stuck in my head because I'm like, man, I have learned this lesson the hard way a few times. Where it says, the quote was, the long way is the fastest way. And I'm like, I just feel that because I think that there is this like desire to want to go fast when you're a high achiever and you feel like you're capable of it and you're watching other people do it and you don't get to see behind the scenes and all the chaos and all the sleepless nights and all the, you know, stress that they're going through to make this happen. You just see the way that they present it online and that you're totally capable of it and, you know, that you should go for it. And then we get overwhelmed and we take on too much and we're doing a bunch of half-assed things and nothing is coming to fruition the way that it, you know, you envision it at the beginning. And so it's like, that quote has been replaying in my head all week because I'm just like, man, you're right. There needs to be more people who are vocalizing, just slow down. Time is on your side. You're only racing yourself. You do not have to have, like I was on a call today on an RV park call for Heather Blankenship's mastermind. And one person in there was like, I'm going to open up 4 campgrounds this year, 1 a quarter. And Heather was like, no, you're not.
Okay, good. I'm glad. glad that was a response.
You're probably not even going to get one this year. Like, I'm going to be so honest. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Like,
And
yes.
just, again, I think because you guys do this so well too, it's like, if you're going to do something like that, you have to put so much intentionality into it. And I think people don't realize that. Like, I even tell people, I'm like, when you go into a restaurant, you just like feel so good and you like leave, like everything was probably thought through. Like, where the chairs were, the lighting, like the colors, all of these things that you didn't realize were put into that. And so if people are like, well, I just want a restaurant.
Yeah.
And I do feel like that happens. I think that even happened, like that happened with like the mentorship. Like I feel like you guys like did such a great job. And then I think people are like, oh, let's do a mentorship.
Everyone launched one.
But then not realizing like, oh, I show up on social media. These are the things that you have to do.
Yeah.
And these are the things that we've already done before we did that. And I think like people, again, it's like you don't think about that piece. So yeah, I feel like I always say that, like, don't skip the experience too. Cause I think a lot of the things, like even when I do this resort, it's like all of those lessons I learned, like there's a reason why I'm waiting. And I think a lot of it was like even just structuring how I want employees and stuff. I probably would have done something so different and I would have been unhappy. And I really want this property to like feel good.
Yeah.
And then it's right down from our house and I just like want it to be like kind of this like generational thing. And so it's like, I'm okay. But it's hard when you're in it to be like, okay, am I making, why I'm going slow and why am I doing this? Why are all these obstacles happening? And then it's like, now when you back up a little bit, you're like, okay,
this is all meant for
and
a reason.
And I feel like things happen for a reason. It's easy for me to see that with other things. But when I'm like in it, I'm like, why is this happening?
Why is it taking so long? And why is everything not going exactly how it should be?
Yeah.
I feel
Well, I think we have time for one more question. And I have a question that I'm like trying to not put pressure on people with goals for the future because I think that we're all trying to like subtract. So my question is, what do you think is the best decision you made for yourself last year to get to like where you are today?
I think that would be just putting myself first. Like showing up for myself. I feel like I pride myself in showing up for other people. Like it's a core value for me.
And you are excellent at it.
And,
yes, you are.
But like I'll put everyone before myself. And I really have had to do that even with my family, which feels really weird. But it's like if I'm not well, I don't show up well. And so yeah, I think that and I really want to continue like expanding that this year. But I've taken a lot of steps quietly. Like I've been working out 3 days a week and like changing my eating habits and taking baths and going on walks and just like putting all these things in place. Like even just simple things like flossing my teeth and washing my face. Like all of those things go away when I'm busy, and it's easy for me to be like, oh, I just don't have time for that.
Yeah.
And
Everything else is more important.
Yes. So I got this Way of Life app. I don't know if it's the best one. I just literally like downloaded the first one, and you can track all those things. So I literally have flossing my teeth, taking my vitamins, washing my face at night, in the morning, and I'm like checking them off, and I'm at like 2 weeks. So
Good for
doing
you.
good. Not on everything. Like I have ones in there that I'm like wanting to do, like caffeine. I'm on like day 3. So I'm just trying to like slowly add, because I think this is also like an ADHD thing. It's like, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to change my life, and I'm going to
January 1,
January
new
1,
me.
new me. And then I fail. So it's like, I'm trying to be like, okay. And again, not be so hard on myself and be like, okay, I accomplished these things. But I have seen the difference of like seeing how I've changed and how I show up for people even more so now when I'm like, okay, I've been taken care of.
Yeah.
And then if I'm not, maybe I don't have time to like put out there. Like it just is what it is.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that because I'm like, especially as a mom, catching myself like I'll be putting Oz first all day long, and then he'll do something, and it's because I'm like so overwhelmed. I didn't do anything for myself that day, and I get so irritated, and I'm like, he's a baby.
Yeah.
So like, let's just relax.
You're like, I gotta focus in on what's happening inside of me right now.
Like, I didn't get to brush my teeth that day. I didn't shower. I didn't eat breakfast because he needed to eat his breakfast, things like that. And so like actually taking the time to do it for yourself is so important, because then I won't be raging at everybody around me. It'll be the end of the day. Sarah's texting me. I'm irritated with her because she texted me. It's nothing that she did. It's because I'm so overwhelmed because I didn't take care of myself.
And then you feel bad, and it's like a whole cycle.
I snap at Tyler. Like it's a whole big thing.
So I think it's like, and I think also like why like having that as like a personal goal is because I do feel like then the other stuff start falling into place. Like obviously I will show up better for like my guests. Like I'll have more energy to go to the units. I'll be able to communicate nicer to my cleaners. Like I just feel like all of those things fall in line, and I just feel like it's like that.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're talking about this stuff because this is what I'm interested in. So,
Yes.
okay,
I know.
good. We're going to hyper fixate on this now, Emily. This is now a health podcast.
Literally, I was just going to say we've gone over an hour because we're like literally just chatting with our friend.
Okay, let's wrap it up and let's go to dinner then.
Yes, let's do
So
it.
we can continue. Okay. Well, Carrie, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Thank you for being our first guest. Always a great conversation. To our listeners, if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, please do. That helps us more than almost anything else that you can do. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.